Again, my name is Sandra Spencer, and I am the Executive Director of the National Federation of Families for Children's Mental Health. And I'm going to be doing this webinar along with Susan Richardson, who's the Executive Director of Reclaiming Futures. And we have a couple of other presenters that Susan will introduce you to a little bit later in the webinar. So I'm very happy you all are able to join us today, and we're going to get started. The first thing we're going to do is we have a poll, and we're going to want to find out who you are and who you represent on the call today. So if we could put up our poll, we want to know what's your role and who you are on this call. So we're going to give about 10 or 20 seconds for you guys to click in and tell us who you are and who you represent on the poll. You can start now. Mm-hmm. I'm going to wait a few more seconds to allow others of you to complete the poll. Okay, 5 more seconds. All right, thank you. We're going to end our poll now. So we thank you so much. We always like to kind of know who's on our call, and we have a significant amount of you all who are with juvenile justice and a few from our other segments. So we're really happy that you all were able to join us today. So this is a look at our learning objectives. This is what we hope to accomplish in the hour that we'll be with you today. So our learning objectives are to understand and discuss why family and youth voice is very critical to the work that you do within juvenile justice, to incorporate a family voice into your practices, and to learn how Reclaiming Future sites successfully integrate the family voice. I'm going to start by telling you guys a little bit about the National Federation of Families for Children's Mental Health. The National Federation of Families is a national organization, and we have about 130 to 150 chapters across the United States. And we're made up of families and caregivers and young people who have a lived experience of either raising a child or children with mental health issues or being youth consumers themselves. And so the National Federation's vision is through a family and youth-guided approach, children and youth with emotional, behavioral, and mental health challenges and their families obtain needed supports and services so that their children grow up healthy and that they can maximize their potential. So throughout this webinar, when you hear me talk about families, we're also talking about the youth voice, the extended family, and the caregivers, those people who really are involved in the multiple systems that treat our children. So what are we talking about when we talk about engaging families or family voice? So family involvement can be demonstrated in many ways. The first way I think about is diversity. And so whatever program you're working with, where you're working with children, youth, and families, the population that you work with, you really have to make sure that you're meeting the diverse needs of that population with your staff, with your workload, and with the programs that you're implementing. And you have to have broad representation. That means if you're asking families to be involved in your work, make sure that the families that you bring to your tables represent actually the people you're serving. And then peer support, because in order for families and parents, caregivers to really be involved, sometimes they really need support of their peers and other ones to kind of help and support. And then, of course, youth voice. So families can be involved in all levels of your program. They can be involved at a policy level. They can be involved in planning, implementation, and evaluation. And we're going to talk more about some of those items in a few minutes. So what can we learn from families and having families involved at our tables and our planning processes and informing our programs? So families know their children's diagnoses. So when a child comes into any type of system, sometimes the systems don't understand that the children may be dealing with some mental health challenges. Families know their medication needs, and families also can tell you what treatment worked and what things that may not have worked so well. And then families will tell you which behaviors in their children will present a problem and which environments work best for them and maybe some things that we may need to avoid. And one of the things that we found out is families can be the best advocates for your program. If families get involved in what you're doing and in your programs, and those programs work, and those programs are really helping and supporting that young person and that family, they will be the best advocates, especially in funding situations. They will really go to bat to keep those programs. And sometimes families act as case management because usually children with mental health challenges are involved in multiple systems. So they may not just be involved in juvenile justice. They may be involved in the child welfare system, the mental health system, special education. And so families kind of help keep those services coordinated, kind of in the role of a case manager. And then families can support other families. So as other families come into services and other families need information, sometimes they would rather hear from somebody else who has had that experience, who's been where they're going, and who knows the system from the inside. And families can influence policy. We find that a lot of our advocacy organizations and family-run organizations, federation chapters, they do a lot around influencing policies that govern some of these agencies, whether they're state, local, or federal agencies. But with all that being said, family involvement is not easy because it does require significant and sustained efforts. Because, you know, families whose children are involved in these multiple systems, sometimes we know that their involvement has not always been a positive experience. By the time a child has entered into a juvenile justice system, you rest assured that there has been some significant issues. And so sometimes it takes a lot of effort to really get involved the families. So you have to be deliberate and conscientious from the start, understanding some of the vulnerabilities of that family and understand their hesitancy to get involved. But never assume that you have family involvement because you're having some day-to-day conversations with families, maybe about issues. When we talk about family involvement, we want to make sure families are involved in every level, not just when things are going wrong or when things need to be improved, but that families can come to the table and do planning and implementation suggestions and things like that. And family involvement should be fully integrated in all your programs and in your policies and policy and procedures making. Family involvement should not be a separate component. What we find out a lot of people do is they may have a group of families and they may form like a family advisory committee, and they have the family groups over on the side that kind of every now and then gives their opinion. But we want it to be fully integrated into all kinds of programs that treat our children. We want the family voice involved. And this family voice should include the voices of youth and young adults at whatever age that's appropriate and according to their maturity level. So, individuals and families, family-run organizations, in order to do this, we have to have financial support and we have to be encouraged to do so. We have to be welcomed at the table. And one of those ways, I've listed a few here, that families feel engaged and encouraged to come is when they feel like their voices are heard. So we don't want to ask families to come and give input and then have families feel like they're being patronized. When families are given information they can use, they're fully prepared to participate in meetings, and they can take responsibilities for some of the decisions made. So they feel like they have a voice. If they have a voice in making the decisions, then they're more apt to take responsibility when things need to be changed. Peers and mentors. Families really do need mentors to participate on some of the levels I'm talking about. For instance, in your program, if you have a governance board or different committees that that do action items, families really may need support to participate on those levels of committee work and governance work. They'll also need tools and resources to help them develop the skills to do so. Sometimes families are so engaged and in the middle of their family situation that we have to help them think in a broader sense to be able to participate. And independent, so that they're encouraged to speak up and really tell the truth about their experience, because it's those families' experience in your program that really will help you when you do your continuous quality improvement efforts. So we're going to pause right now because we have another polling question. So here's the question and here are your options. How are you currently involving families in your program? So are you not currently involving families? Do you have one family member on your governance board and maybe one family member on other committees? Do you have several family members on all of your boards and committees? And do you have a family advisory board or some type of family advisory council? So we're going to give about 30 seconds for you to read these options and fill out the poll. We're going to take about 10 more seconds. We need a lot more responses to this poll. Okay, 10 more seconds. Thank you. We can end the poll. I don't see any more responses. So as you can see, probably over half of you are not currently involving families. And so we're going to really use this opportunity to really give you some ideas and ways that you can start engaging and using families in your work. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the experience of families whose children have mental health issues and who end up in the juvenile justice system. So the vast majority of families raising children with mental health needs are normal, healthy families who happen to be experiencing really stressful situations. One of the things that has been historical in the children's mental health movement is that a lot of times children with mental health issues that are involved in multiple systems, they get a reputation of being dysfunctional families or bad parents or people who just don't know how to discipline or care for their children. And so we really like to let people know that mental illness can affect any child, any family, in any walk of life. And so a lot of times these are healthy families who just are experiencing very stressful challenges. And then we also know that good parenting skills don't necessarily work on children with behavioral health issues, especially when these children have a severe emotional disturbance or emotional problems. And there are things like they're hearing voices, they go through manic or depressive mood swings, they have really self-abusive behaviors. So the strategies that we learn as a good parent doesn't always work. And in mental health problems, we know the only way they manifest in children is usually through their behaviors. And so because of that, sometimes these children, they don't go through the typical stages of development. They display a lot of negative behaviors. And so this usually causes what I mentioned before, the parents to kind of be blamed, what we call the words blamed and shamed. And so it's really important as you develop a program, that you really have a healthy way of looking at families, and that will really help you involve them more. Families can be scared. I found out from listening to thousands of parents over the years and doing some of the trainings that we do, is families have fear that their children will, they hope their children never enter two systems, the juvenile justice system and the child welfare system, because families really have a fear about this. And, you know, with the child welfare system, that their children will be taken away and put in foster care, and juvenile justice system, that they will stay in there and end up someday in the criminal justice system. So, you know, families are afraid, and sometimes they don't speak up, and they're not honest, and they don't want to let people in too much to their families. And then we can sometimes be misinformed about things like what is the mission and the goal of these agencies. I know a lot of families who think that the only goal of some of these agencies is to take the children away or lock the children up. They don't realize that these agencies really have a mission and a goal to help their children succeed, and that they have certain ways and mandates of doing that. So sometimes understand that when families come into your system, they may be coming there from a totally different perspective. And so we need to make sure that they get the right information, that we give it to them in a very non-judgmental way. That's so important. And another thing is families feel so isolated when their children are having severe behavior issues stemming from their mental health disorder. Because, you know, those kids are usually known in the neighborhood. They're known to the schools. They're the ones who are constantly in trouble, maybe getting suspended. And those families feel enough self-blame already. So it's very isolating for those families. And then families can be confused when we do come and get involved. When we do engage in meetings and on committees, we don't understand the vocabulary, the acronyms, or the technical jargon. So you have to do a lot of things to make the environment welcoming for families. In the children's mental health arena, we've developed a language called family-driven care. And years ago, when the Center for Mental Health Services started these comprehensive systems of care to treat children, they asked the National Federation of Families to come up with a definition of family-driven care. The word family-driven was first recognized from 2003 with President Bush's New Freedom Commission. He charged those folks with looking at our mental health system in America and come up with recommendations around how we could improve mental health. So a lot of you may be familiar with that commission report. But one of the elements in that commission report that came out as a major goal was that mental health care had to be consumer and family-driven. And so we just defined family-driven as meaning that families can have a primary decision-making role in the care of their own children. But we went further than that, as well as the care of all children in their community, state, tribe, territory, and the nation. That means families need to be on committees, on governance structures, a part of decision-making. And families need to be helping to choose culturally and linguistically competent services, supports, and service providers that look like the people they're serving and that can understand the cultural perspective of those they're serving. Families need to be involved in setting goals, not just goals that govern their own personal lives and their children, but setting goals of the agency and the programs that serve them, designing, implementing, and evaluating those programs. Families can be involved in monitoring the outcomes and partnering in funding decisions. And that's always a hard one for folks, because if you're developing a program for families, and part of that program is funding different services, families can be involved to tell you what services probably deserve the greatest resources and what services may not be so helpful, and maybe we shouldn't put as many resources in those services. So one of the mantles of the children's mental health movement and the National Federation of Families is that parents who have had the lived experience of raising a child and then navigating multiple systems have all wanted a way to give back and to help other families. One of the things I say all the time, because I am a parent who's raised a child with severe mental health issues, is that I don't want another parent to have to go through what I went through to get services and supports for my son. And the reason I think I went through so many challenges is because I didn't know who to talk to. I didn't know what services were available. Sometimes I didn't know how to gain access, and I didn't know what different agencies and programs were available and what they had to offer my family. So I became a mentor or peer support to some other families. So as their children were going through, I could say, well, if you try this, that'll work. And if you call this agency, they can help you. And so one of the things that we've done is we've developed a process called parent support providers. And these are parents who now can be nationally certified as peer support partners, and they can help other families navigate multiple systems and get the help and support they need. Now, this is a national certification. It has eligibility criteria, it has training requirements, and then there's a competency test. And families have to be able to pass this national certification test, and then they can become certified parent support providers and peer supports to help other families through the system. So right now, I just want to take a minute to offer just a few suggestions about involving families in the juvenile justice system. And these ideas have come from me talking with families who've been involved in other systems on different levels, through our chapters, through our family-run organizations, and just ideas that we've gathered over the years around how to really engage families, especially within juvenile justice. So one of the things they talk about is aftercare. What happens once a child is transitioned back from maybe detention or a residential facility and have to come back into their community? How do we offer that kind of support and that kind of aftercare? I remember after my son had struggled for many years, he was put into a residential treatment facility, and that was the alternative to a juvenile justice detention center. And he stayed in this facility for about 18 months. And then once he came home, he went right back to school, right back into the community without any good transition planning. And one of the most simple questions that he asked me was, where do I tell people I've been all this long time? So we did not give him or the family the support. And then the schools weren't sure if he was still on his grade level. We didn't know how to really integrate him back into the community, how to help him go back to some of the after-school extracurricular activities he was involved in. So some of that aftercare was really important. And tools to help families become better advocates and caregivers. It's really important that families learn how to speak up, talk about the needs of their children, and how to be advocates. And then the use of parent support providers that I described, having parents who've already been through the system, who've had some success with their children transitioning back into the community, having those parents ready to help other parents. And one way you can do that is juvenile justice facilities and programs can hire peer and parent support providers to really give that extra added support to families as they really go through this very challenging experience. And then we can build formal and informal environments for communication. And I know that a lot of times in juvenile justice environments, families would love to be able to talk to some of the other parents that they see coming in and out and visiting their children. They could do that by focus groups or support groups, educational forums, social events, because parents really need that support. And another way to do it is contacting family-run organizations that do support the families, who have educational seminars and webinars for families. And then create a peer network so that these families will always have a way to stay connected to each other. This can be calling trees and listserv, chat rooms, many ways I think that systems and programs can help connect families to each other. And then sponsoring conferences and summits and ways for families to come and learn about the system. And not only for families to learn, but for providers to learn how to engage and better collaborate with families. And what about this idea of helping families formulate evaluation models so that you can hear from families what questions are important to ask in evaluation? Because the things that agencies look for to measure success, they are wonderful, but sometimes families want different information. For example, when your child integrated back into the system, was he able to really maintain a cadre of friends? Was he able to participate successfully in sports activities? You know, there's some things we want to know that we want to have measured through evaluation. And so another strategy is having families create and implement some kind of service satisfaction survey so that families are asking families how the service was. Because we know it's very awkward to receive service from a service provider and then have that service provider give you a survey and say, how was my services? You know, how did you find things? It's very hard for a family to be honest in that situation. So helping other families do that with each other is very helpful. And then having grassroots advocacy and youth organizations be a support to that family, hiring families in leadership positions through your agency so that they can give that support to families. And then developing brochures and videos and things like that to really help families understand your system and really help families do that peer and youth peer support piece that I talked about. And another thing that's so important is if you want to do family engagement, if you really want parents involved and at the table, then you have to get buy-in from the top. Because I've seen many times where frontline workers have engaged families and engaged youth, and to have their supervisor, administrator, tell them that they shouldn't be that engaged with their clients. So developing tangible goals for family and youth involvement with outcomes and plans, and also plan to how to have resources to support that. Because it really will take resources to have families at the table, support them with stipends, with transportation, with child care, with all the things that they will need to really participate in some of the agency work. And this next one is very important, to always be clear with families about the realities and the limitations that exist around their involvement. Because when we bring families to the table, we want to make sure that they know that there are some things that this agency can provide and there are some things that the agency can't. And if we're clear, then families won't feel like they're giving suggestions and bringing forth ideas and nobody is listening. And make sure that there are clear role expectations and that families really understand the lines of authority, and make sure that you're articulating very clear what you want them to do and how you need their participation. And now I'm going to turn it over to Susan, because Susan is going to talk to you a little bit more about reclaiming futures. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Sandra. And we encourage you, if you have questions right now on your mind for Sandra, to use the chat box. But again, I'm Susan Richardson, National Executive Director of Reclaiming Futures, and we are a national model for communities helping teens overcome drugs, alcohol, and crime. And we want to share with you a little bit about how we have successfully integrated family voice in our sites across the country. And to do that, I would like to just take a brief moment to talk about the model that the communities in Reclaiming Futures have all implemented. Our mission is to get youth in the juvenile justice system more treatment, better treatment, and beyond treatment. And that is both substance abuse and mental health treatment. And more treatment means that many youth that have problems, substance abuse and mental health problems, are not receiving adequate treatment. They're not receiving the best treatment, which we know to be evidence-based and youth-specific. And then that all-important beyond treatment component where we work with youth and families to reintegrate or maximize their place in the community, above and beyond systems. So we are about more treatment, better treatment, and beyond treatment. And Reclaiming Futures is in 39 sites now in 18 states. And coming up, I will have some really exciting actual parents from our sites to talk about how this actually looks on the ground, all with the hope that you will find ways to increase family voice in what you're doing in your local juvenile justice system. Now, the model has 6 steps. I'm going to be brief on this, and please check it out where you can read it better on reclaimingfutures.org. But the model that we have developed and are implementing with sites across the country includes the first step of doing an initial screening that actually identifies the severity or the needs of youth as far as mental health problems or substance abuse problems. The assessment, the screening will indicate if a further assessment is needed. And if it is needed, that will help the community team realize what type of treatment would best benefit the youth and family. It is through evidence-based screening and assessment that you get the right treatment at the right time and the right dose for the right child, the premier system of care principles. The third step is service coordination, where we are looking at the treatment plan, or the success plan as some of our sites call it, and getting services lined up for the youth and families. Next is actually starting services, and we recommend that there is at least one service contact within the 14 days of that full assessment, followed by the youth actually showing up and continuing in a treatment plan by defining engagement as 3 successful service contacts within 30 days of that youth's full assessment. And then finally, transition is step 6, and that's where the youth, family, and providers are all focusing on reentry, recovery if that's applicable, restitution if applicable, and just readiness for what's next with pro-social activities, education, jobs, etc. You can see at the top that steps 1 through 3 focus on a coordinated individual response, and then we graduate toward a community-directed engagement for the youth and families. I want to say that in each one of these steps, the family has a very specific role, and with screening and assessment, Reclaiming Futures emphasizes that the family must be involved from the beginning. The assessment must be designed so that families can understand what is being said, and that we are streamlining some of our duplications in the systems as family members get so tired of answering the same questions multiple times. We are finding out who is important to the young person and what are their special assets and needs and interests of the youth and the family. As we move into service coordination, the family is critical, that the care plan that is decided upon meets the needs and the strengths of the youth and the family. And the family is made aware of their rights to bring an advocate of their choosing and to participate with natural helpers or community members in the planning process. And as we get started with getting youth-needed treatment for mental health and substance abuse issues, it does take a team, family, natural helpers, everyone, to get the youth to that first appointment and then to continue to engage them. And having at least one mentor, community member, natural helper who is important to that youth must be a part of the success plan as they are looking to keep them engaged in positive development activities, as we've mentioned, school, employment, recreation, volunteer activities, and then getting ready to transition into a bright and successful future. That's briefly the model, and on the local level in our sites, the leadership comes from shared leadership within the community, beginning with the judge, the community, youth, and families, both the treatment professionals, alcohol, drug, and mental health, juvenile justice, or probation officers, or court counselors, And locally we have a project director to help lead this group. We call them fellows in that they are representatives of larger community colleagues in that same discipline. So you'll hear us say we have a judicial fellow in the judge, community fellows who you're going to meet here in just a few minutes that are youth, that are families, and then treatment, juvenile justice, and project director fellows. Now is Victoria Cam on the line and
hello.
Able to, hey Victoria.
Hey,
I'd like
how you doing?
Great. I'd love to introduce everyone to Victoria Cam and Tabitha Longeway. Victoria is going to go first, and she will speak about 5 minutes as a parent. She's a parent advocate for the court and a community fellow in Toledo, Ohio. And then when it comes time for Tabitha, I'll do her introduction. I will say that, yes, both of these family members are from Ohio. That's because Reclaiming Futures has 4 sites in Ohio and 4 outstanding sites. So thank you for your availability. And Victoria, I'll just hand the mic over to you.
All right, thank you, Susan. Hello, everyone. I'd like to underscore all the stuff that you heard before. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're good.
I'm sorry, I have some background, but that's okay. Thinking about this issue about family voices, I don't think there's a person in the juvenile justice system who doesn't believe parents and families are critical to the success of youth. But having said that, I don't think there's a person who hasn't felt frustrated in getting parents and families actually engaged. In Lucas County, Toledo, Ohio, we attempt to engage parents in 3 different ways. First, we have a support group, a very active support group, because every parent is made party to the court orders of the youth. So they are expected by the court to come to the parent support group. My official title is Reclaiming Futures Parent Peer Support Facilitator, and that is a paid position through the Reclaiming Futures grant. I introduced myself to new families as a parent partner because I had a daughter in the program, and that seems to open them up a little bit. I think the most important thing is the philosophy of the group, which is we are good parents with good kids who went off the rails. It is so important to be as strengths-based with our families and parents as we are with our youth. I have yet to find a parent who wanted their child substance addicted or dependent. And I assume right from the beginning they want to do their very best to make a difference. Now, is that always true? I say yes. I think every parent wants to do better. They might not be there yet. They might be far away, but they want to help their kids. I also want to say that the program or the support group is not therapeutic. I am not a therapist. It can be cathartic, but if parents need more, I refer them to someone else in the court who can refer them to the services they need. Our curriculum, we do have a curriculum, is evidence-based. And then we reward parents who complete all 10 lessons with a framed certificate and a gift card. This is then done at the end of status review hearings, if at all possible. And every parent has been very appreciative and honored by this recognition in front of the entire court. We do have a quarterly evaluation, and I agree that there are some problems with that. They are anonymous. I don't get them right away, and there are some open-ended questions. The project director gets them, and then, of course, we talk about it. We have a very forward-thinking judge, Denise Cubbin. Because of her, I have a place at the table, and that's unusual for parents. Our project director, LaTanya Harris, who actually hired me, has been nothing but encouraging and supportive. Now, we do meet weekly to discuss the previous parent support group, and other issues come up because I have been a parent in this bucket. I sometimes speak, let's just say straight from the hip. And that's not always best practice, and usually it's just not the best way. So I learn a lot from LaTanya. But what's really interesting is I spoke to LaTanya about this. She said what the court has learned most from the court side is the value of training, my training. I've been in the 7 Challenges training. I am doing completing motivational interviewing next week. I've been to a lot of smaller trainings. I attended NADCP last May. So this improvement in my skill sets really pays off for parents, but it also pays off for the court staff because it's easy to forget I'm speaking with a parent voice, with a family voice, that I'm not a probation officer or a case manager, and I don't always know the acronyms, the process, or the prior records of our youth, and I have been with them for nearly 2 years now, so that's helpful. Finally, we ask all kinds of people to sit in our support group meetings. I've had experts in trauma, grief counseling, drug treatment, all come in, and they offer a perspective that no one else in the group has. Because if you have a child, that's the only perspective you can bring to the group. Sometimes it's court staff or just I'd say random person. I'm choosier than that. But someone will say, I'd really like to come in and sit in. And it works out so well because a fresh voice can make something that we have struggled with in our group crystal clear. Like we've never heard it before. It all becomes explained. As mentioned before, I think one of the biggest issues for parents in the parent support group is judgment from their own community. Because an arrest drastically changes not only how parents see themselves, but how friends and family treat them. They learn that others can look at them without judgment, and we are sitting at the same table after all. It helps them learn how to better decide what and to whom they share information. They become empowered, and they can begin to distance themselves from the actions of their children, and that makes a huge difference. We are facing challenges in our treatment court. Heroin use is becoming more frequent. It generally requires an immediate stay in residential treatment. More parents are in recovery themselves, and while they get addiction as a strong genetic component, it adds a layer of guilt that's very difficult to get through. There is a different public perspective now about marijuana. Interestingly, youth and parents both consume information vastly differently than when I was in the program with my daughter. It was about 5 years ago. Social media is number 1, video is number 2, and I don't have a single person in my group at the moment who reads for pleasure. So handing out, not necessarily flyers, but handouts or books, it doesn't do much. We are changing our orientation procedure, which I try to do within the first week. We're putting all the materials online on a wiki so that they can look at it, videos and all that kind of stuff, so they can not only hear it, they can go back and check something if they're having an issue. So all in all, I think we're doing a pretty good job. But we're always looking to do better. When you know better, you do better. And that is why I think Lucas County allowing the juvenile treatment court to have a family voice has made it such a success. Thank you.
Susan, are you there? This is Sandra.
Yes, are you there?
Oh, I'm so
Yes.
sorry. I said something brilliant, but I was on mute. I'm so sorry. I was just saying, Victoria, thank you, and stay on the line in case there are other questions. And we're not experts at doing Family Voice, but we are definitely trying to do it well. And these 2 sites are wonderful examples. And the second contributor parent is Tabitha Longeway, and thank you so much, Tabitha, for joining the call. She is a parent, and she is part of the Parent Advisory Board in Dayton, Ohio, one of our original sites. And I will turn it over to you, Tabitha.
Hi, Susan. My name is Tabitha, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about the Reclaiming Futures program. First of all, I can't imagine what would have happened to my son if he wasn't involved with the court's Reclaiming Future program. If he hadn't gotten assessed and connected with the right care, he would have slipped through the cracks of the court and further into addiction. We are so grateful, my husband and I, for the caring probation officer, the Reclaiming Future staff, and the judge for their time and commitment to my family. Not only do we have a voice, first I am on the Parent Advisory Board. I am a natural helper, and so is my husband. And I'm one of two parents allowed to sit on the executive board with the judges, and we do have a vote. We've had parents come with concerns the detention brochure. The brochure didn't meet the needs of the parents, and instead of the courts not addressing the issue, they took the input from the parents. We were able to revise the brochure. The probation officers, all the parents, you actually sit with the probation officer with your child to determine what goals and treatment options that are available for that child. Judge Capizzi goes above and beyond. We even offer incentives for our parents that come to court and go above with their child, even if it's just a gas card. Parents appreciate that. But I think what keeps parents from getting involved is that a lot of times you're already ashamed of what's going on in your life, and you feel that that person that you may be dealing with, they don't have empathy, or that maybe they think they're better than you are, or they can't relate. And my husband and I, we're a military family, and when you have one child that's doing everything okay, and when you get the second child that totally has just gone off just crazy, it's hard, and you do feel you're being judged. And I think that having the right attitude and a caring staff really will get more parents engaged. And I could go on and on about our program, but it's just, you don't want your child to go through the system. And I've heard horrors from other courts, and I think that I am thankful that when it did happen, we were with Montgomery County. I didn't have any bad experiences, and they went above and beyond, and that's why my husband and I have made it a passion of ours to become natural helpers, to sit on these boards, to try to be there for other parents, if for nothing else, just for support, and let them know they're not alone.
That is so critical. Thank you, Tabitha. And Tabitha has also worked with a subcommittee of our community fellowship on a survey for family satisfaction with the justice system. Sandra referred to that in some of her comments, but we appreciate your work there too, Tabitha and Victoria. And Tabitha, these next slides talk a little bit, I know you're on the phone, talk a little bit about the vision where you are. I just happen to have these, and the vision is to be innovation in treating youth with strength-based philosophies and practice there in Dayton. And it's with the youth and families, not to the families. They believe in Montgomery County that all youth can succeed, and everyone shares responsibility for the success of the youth. They use that success plan. They use that term success plan. And we can do better and change the system when we believe that we can. You would say, you would echo that philosophy, Tabitha, even though you couldn't see those slides?
Yes, I do. Yes, yes.
That's great. And thank you both. Stay on for questions. The next community that I just wanted to mention how culturally appropriate family voice and community involvement can be incorporated successfully into the work of reclaiming youth. And this is just a wonderful photograph from Anchorage, Alaska, in the tradition of strengthening circles, the Eskimo blanket toss. And you can see where family, friends, and community are in a ceremony where the youth is lifted to new heights through the canvas or special skin that each member is holding. They did a lot in Anchorage with involving families and in integrating a lot of different well-meaning community partners into one operating group and one operating agreement. That still goes on today. We're very proud of all of these sites and their contributions to the work of reclaiming youth and families. We had our colleagues in Snohomish, Washington, who also wish they could join us today, but they are working toward full integration of parent voice into their work. Of course, no one has arrived, but they wanted to share that they do have a parent on their change team. They are trying very hard to involve graduates and families as volunteers to then turn around and help peer support with youth and families in the court. So I hope that the view and the voices from some of the sites have helped you in your thinking about how to increase family voice where you are. And we now have a third polling question that I'll turn over to Sandra.
Thanks, Susan. And so we are very interested in being able to meet some of your needs and providing you some technical assistance. So this question is, what type of technical assistance would you find most helpful? And one is just generally how to engage families on some of the other elements I talked about. And then supporting families to sit on governance boards and committees. And what about agency readiness? What about making sure that your agency or your program is really ready to partner with families? And then how many of you are really ready to just move toward family-driven practices where your policies and your procedures and your funding decisions are being made with families helping drive those decisions? And then there's a space for other. And in the other category, you can use the chat box or the Q&A box. So we're going to pause a minute, and we really want to know what your TA needs are and what we can do to be most helpful. So we're going to open the poll and wait for your responses. A few more seconds to really have folks tell us what your TA needs are. Okay, we can close the poll. And as we look at this, 60% said that you really wanted to know how to just engage families. And so we're really going to try to really come up with some really good suggestions around how through your programs and your agencies that you can really still, getting started is probably the hardest part of all of this. How do we, from the beginning, really get started on engaging families and having a good cadre of them involved in multiple levels of your system. So we appreciate you answering that survey question for us. So right now, we're going to see if there's any questions from you all. We have a few minutes, and you have the Q&A box, and you can put your questions in the Q&A box that we can answer for you, and we'd be happy to do that. And while we wait, Susan, I don't know if you have any closing remarks you'd like to make, but we're going to see if anybody will put any questions in our Q&A box before we end.
Yes, please do. And do you have any questions for our parent representatives, either Victoria or Tabitha?
I don't see anybody typing. Maybe we gave them a lot of food for thought.
Right, and so in closing, Tabitha or Victoria, do you have any closing thoughts for the good of the group, or believe you've covered it?
Hi, this is Tabitha. I noticed 50% wanted family engagement, but I really think the key is using other parents. As a parent, you can relate to someone who's going through what you're going through.
Right. Excellent reinforcement. Yes. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello. Is that Victoria?
Yeah, sorry. I don't know what I'm doing sometimes on this mute button. Yes, I agree with Tabitha. The fact that my daughter was in the parent support group, or that I was in the parent support group, and she went through this process, it's huge. It makes a tremendous difference, and parents will say things to me that they wouldn't tell someone else maybe until I encourage them to do that. And the only other thing I would say is I agree. Although there's been family engagement in Lucas County at least as far back as 2008, because that's when I started with Ashley. Yeah, I think starting it is probably the hardest part, and I would say go for it. Parents are desperate to have a place at the table, so I encourage you all to please just do it.
Thank you.
So we have on the screen my contact information and Susan's contact information. We are more than happy to offer you any technical assistance or support in getting started with family engagement. Like I said, we have chapters and family groups all over the country, and claiming tonight, so we can really help you guys connect with families and get that family voice. So I want to thank you guys for participating in the webinar. And Susan, I give you a chance to say thank you, and then we can end our call.
Thanks for participating. Thank you for your partnership, Sandra.
And thanks everybody for joining us. Have a good afternoon.